All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are absolutely shattering the popular myths surrounding the origins of the world's most notorious criminal syndicate. If you're picturing, noble bandits or ancient urban street gangs fighting for scraps in dimly lit alleys, well, you're in for a pretty wild ride. Because the true genesis of the Sicilian Mafia is far stranger than any movie, and it actually starts right out in the blinding Mediterranean sun. Okay, let's dive into this. Just think about this contrast for a second. On one hand, you have a bright, healthy, literally life-saving yellow lemon, and on the other, you have the dark, hyper-violent, incredibly organized criminal underworld. It feels like a totally absurd connection, right? But today, we are going to unpack exactly how a totally mundane agricultural fruit directly birthed the lethal, highly structured empire of Cosa Nostra. To really wrap our heads around this, we've got to travel way back to the age of discovery. Out there on the open ocean, a sailor's greatest enemy wasn't actually pirates or storms. It was a silent, incredibly insidious killer called scurvy. Deprived of vitamin C, a sailor's body would just slowly, agonizingly disintegrate. It was an absolute horror, and it claimed the lives of over 2 million sailors between 1500 and 1800. I mean, for centuries, scurvy was just decimating entire armadas. Then, right around 1747, a guy named Dr. James Lind proved that citrus miraculously cured the sick. But as we all know, medical bureaucracy is painfully slow. It took nearly 50 years for the British Admiralty to finally mandate daily citrus for its crews. But the moment they did, talk about a butterfly effect. The lemon went from this fancy luxury garnish to an absolutely crucial strategic military asset, triggering a sudden, hyper-capitalist global demand. So where does all this skyrocketing global demand zero in? Right on the Conca d'Oro, which translates to the Golden Shell, located in Palermo, Sicily. With its intense summer sun, really mild winters, and incredibly rich volcanic soil, this fragrant, sensory paradise of a crescent was just uniquely positioned to become the absolute epicenter of this booming new trade. Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer, staggering scale of the wealth this generated. It's honestly mind-blowing. By the 1870s, a single hectare of lemon orchard was bringing in profits 60 times higher than wheat and 30 times higher than vineyards. The lemon boom literally enriched Palermo overnight. It completely transformed Sicily into the Florida or California of its day. But, and this is a huge but, there was a fatal flaw to all this astronomical wealth. You see, lemon trees are incredibly fragile. They require massive upfront capital, constant summer watering, and get this, 7 to 8 years of growth before you see a single crop. And most terrifyingly, while it takes nearly a decade to grow a functioning orchard, it takes a malicious thief with an axe maybe 3 minutes to completely destroy it. This terrifying vulnerability made these wealthy growers absolutely desperate for law and order. But instead, they were trapped in a dangerous power vacuum. The 1860 unification of Italy threw the whole island into chaos. So you've got these growers sitting on immense, highly vulnerable assets, but the newly installed state police force was completely powerless. They were underfunded, mostly from northern Italy, and deeply, deeply distrusted by the locals. Well, you know the saying, nature abhors a vacuum. And trust me, so does an economy. Into this chaotic void stepped a brand new class of men, the gabelloti. These guys were ambitious, ruthless, street-smart middlemen. The aristocratic landowners didn't want to get their hands dirty with actual farming, so they leased their estates to these gabelloti, who in turn hired armed guards on horseback, the campieri, to enforce order. A lot of these guards were actually former outlaws. And very quickly, they realized that they, not the absentee lords, held the actual keys to the kingdom. Since they had total leverage, they basically invented the world's first agricultural protection racket. It's brilliantly devastating when you break it down. First, the guards secretly steal a few crates of lemons in the night. Then, when the devastated grower reports it, the guards miraculously find the stolen goods, for a finder's fee, of course. Next, they offer absolute immunity going forward for a regular payment, known as a pizzo. And if a grower refused, they'd just slash the trunks of those precious 8-year-old trees. The trap was flawless. Now, you might think the real leverage here was just physical violence or that axe in the dark. But actually, the ultimate weapon, it was water. Lemons require staggering amounts of hydration to survive the blistering Sicilian heat. This water was drawn from ancient labyrinthine canals managed by local guards called fontanieri. If a farmer defied the syndicate, the local boss didn't even need to send thugs. He simply ordered the fontanieri to shut off the water. In a matter of days, the golden fruit would shrivel, ensuring absolute financial ruin. By wielding this absolute control over the agriculture, these early syndicates amassed just unimaginable power. They even started calling themselves causce, which is a Sicilian word for the tight, inseparable leaves of an artichoke. It was the perfect symbol for their absolute unity. By dictating prices and bribing politicians, they evolved pretty quickly from rural thugs into a full-blown shadow government. To really grasp the terrifying perfection of this shadow government, we've got to shift gears for a second into what feels like a true crime thriller from 1872. Meet Dr. Gaspare Galati. He was a highly respected surgeon who inherited this magnificent 22-acre lemon estate called the Fondo Riella. Well, he quickly notices the estate is bleeding money and realizes his warden, Benedetto Carollo, is stealing fruit on behalf of a ruthless local mafia boss named Antonino Giamona. Dr. Galati, firmly believing in his rights and the rule of law, did something incredibly brave. He fired the corrupt warden. So Galati brings in a new warden, completely unaware of the massive hornet's nest he's just kicked. Almost immediately, his new employee receives a blunt, terrifying anonymous letter. It read, "Leave the Fondo Riella if you value your life." And it was actually decorated with these crude drawings of skulls and crosses. This wasn't a business negotiation anymore. This was calculated psychological warfare. Now, this new warden, he bravely ignores the threats. But just weeks later, while he's walking down a sunlit path right between the fragrant lemon trees, he gets shot in the back by an unseen assassin wielding a lupra, which is a traditional sawn-off shotgun. It's such a stark, chilling juxtaposition, isn't it? Brutal murder unfolding right amidst the intoxicating perfume of citrus blossoms. You won't believe this, but the local police actually dismissed the assassination as just some quarrel over a woman. So Dr. Galati takes a totally unprecedented step. He bypasses the local cops entirely and writes this meticulously detailed memorandum straight to the Ministry of the Interior in Rome. He outlines the rackets, the water control, the police complicity. Without even realizing it, Galati had just written the very first accurate blueprint of the modern mafia. But unfortunately, Dr. Galati completely underestimated the psychological armor of his enemies. Because when Rome finally did send an investigator down there, they slammed headfirst into a brick wall known as omertà. This wasn't just some casual vow of silence among thieves. It was a strict, weaponized cultural code designed to intimidate the entire public and completely sabotage state investigations. Witnesses suddenly developed amnesia. The police actively dragged their feet. The wall of silence was absolute, leaving Galati completely isolated. Eventually, realizing that his life and his family's lives were in imminent, unavoidable danger, and that the state either could not or would not protect him, Dr. Galati finally surrenders. He packs up his family, abandons his beautiful estate, and flees across the sea to Naples. The tragic conclusion to this chapter is that Antonino Giamona and his criminal enterprise won. The mafia successfully proved that they, not the Italian state, were the true rulers of the lemon groves. And this brilliantly illustrates how the lemon trade was the exact crucible that forged the defining characteristics of Cosa Nostra. Think about it. They established strict territoriality using extreme violence. They institutionalized omertà, weaponizing silence to completely blind the state. And they perfected political collusion, using their massive citrus wealth to trade guaranteed votes for absolute legal immunity and lucrative government contracts. But the world was changing. Right between 1880 and 1914, massive foreign citrus competition from places like California, combined with a devastating vine blight, threw Italy into a deep economic depression. This triggered one of the greatest mass migrations in history. Millions of honest, hardworking Italians boarded steamships for America. But hiding right there among them were a small number of men who had learned their trade in the Conca d'Oro. They literally carried the dark seed of the lemon rackets across the ocean to the tenements of New York and Chicago. Once they arrived, these men quickly realized that the tight-knit, isolated Italian immigrant communities in America were just as vulnerable to extortion as those lemon farmers back in Palermo had been. And then, bam, 1920. The U.S. government enacts Prohibition, banning alcohol. It was the perfect storm. The exact same tactics used to extort lemon farmers, clandestine supply chains, bribing local police, enforcing calculated violence, were perfectly primed to build the massive, multi-million-dollar bootlegging empires of the American mafia. Which brings us to a really modern and honestly tragic epilogue. Fast forward to after World War II. A brand new generation of mafia bosses realizes there's actually way more money to be made in urban concrete than in farming. During what became known as the Sack of Palermo, the local mafia-controlled government oversaw the systematic bulldozing of those historic, fragrant lemon groves. They literally paved over the very orchards where their empire was born, replacing the sweet scent of citrus with cheap concrete high-rises and exhaust fumes. It just leaves you marveling at this profound historical irony, doesn't it? The lemon revolutionized global trade and saved millions of lives from scurvy, but that exact life-saving property sparked a frenzied gold rush that incubated organized crime.
Please like and subscribe.